Alabama heads to the bright lights of the big city this Saturday and will take on the St. John's Red Storm in the world's most famous arena, Madison Square Garden. I'm Charles Branch, and this is Crimson Crossover Cross Court, and I'm pleased to be joined by David Berov of the Eye of the Storm podcast. David, how are you doing this evening?
Charles, thank you so much for having me. St. John's is off to a 1-0 start. The college basketball season is in full force, and man, do we have an amazing game coming up this weekend. I'm so excited.
Well, I see all the Red Storm paraphernalia behind you. You got jerseys and all that. Crimson Crossover was built for Alabama basketball fans to talk about Alabama basketball. Tell us about your fandom for St. John's and what it's meant to you as you've grown up as a Johnny's fan.
Man, you could substitute Alabama for St. John's in the sentence that you just said. And, I've been a St. John's alum going back to 2006, graduated 2010, covered the program as a student, continued after I graduated, then, eventually got into the real world. And about 4 years ago now, started the podcast when things weren't so great around the program. Just wanted to bring content and just some news and a place for fans to vent and listen. And then the year after, Rick Pitino gets hired and, everything flips on its head. And now we're here and, proud to have built a platform that is well received by the St. John's fans. And kind of like what you're doing, it's all about the passion. It's all about, talking to the fans and, just following the team and bringing the news and the info and the fun to the fan base.
When you started the podcast, you probably dreamed of seasons like St. John's had last year. Just an incredible season, really returning to their rightful place on top of the Big East. So I want to hear it from you because we as Alabama fans have experienced a lot of success we've never would have dreamed of over the past, few years. What did last year mean to you as a St. John supporter?
Man, it was a season that like you don't appreciate. I think that for guys like yourself, when you experience so much success, it's I don't think you end up appreciating it. For St. John's fans who have not experienced that type of success since, well, 2000, but honestly, going back to 40 years to 1984, 1985, when St. John's was winning the title of the Big East tournament, was winning the conference. Man, that's a long time to not go with some big wins, to not see confetti fall, and I'm looking at the bag of confetti from Madison Square Garden that I still have. It's right over there. These are moments that you cherish as a fan that you don't want to take for granted, but it also then changes everything within your basketball program because expectations change, desires for winning change, and you just want to feel it again. And then obviously for St. John's last year, yeah, they won the Big East Conference. They won the Big East tournament. They got their first win in the NCAA tournament in 20 years. But I'm sorry, 25 years. But they didn't go further. And so it was almost like I don't want to say a failure of a season, but it was a letdown. You go into this year, expectations are higher than ever. You're the number 5 team in the country to start the year. Delusions of grandeur, whatever you want to call it. The expectations are very, very high in Queens, and we're talking, second weekend type of stuff and beyond.
You talk about expectations growing, and of course, they only grew with the successful offseason y'all had. You have one of the best portal classes. The momentum keeps building. And what I try to do on our side, even though we've had the success, I mean, I still like just stacking up NCAA tournament appearances because as we talk about all the time, you get in the tournament and it comes down to matchups and you never know what's going to happen. I mean,
Yep.
you lose to a team like Arkansas last year, but Arkansas was a top 5 team, top 10 team before the season started last year, and then it all came together. So even with the expectations that are ratcheting up for St. John's, how do you keep them realistic, or do you let those expectations just run wild and hope it works out this year?
It's funny because if that question is posed to the coaching staff and the players, the answer is very different. Rick Pitino is straight up has these guys so media trained right now, and they're all one game at a time, and nothing else. We're not thinking ahead. We want to win. Everybody said it in media availability before game one, where they're like, "Listen, the the goal is not Big East Conference and Big East title, it's NCAA title. And that's the expectation. That's the Rick Pitino expectation, and that is transferred to his players. Now, when you bring in a portal class like you mentioned, when it's headlined by Ian Jackson and Bryce Hopkins and Josan Sandin, Ozias Sellers and Dylan Darling, these are huge, huge names in the portal. It's the number one ranked portal class in the country. That brings a lot of pressure. That brings a lot of weight. It brings a lot of expectations, and everybody's looking at you. There's a bullseye on your back. That's the difference this year, is that for the first time in a very long time, I would say probably since about February of last year, going into this year, St. John's is now the hunted. There's a bullseye on their back. And that changes how the fans, fans are have their chest puffed out, and we're all excited walking into Madison Square Garden on Saturday, basically like we're gonna beat Alabama. That's unheard of mindset for St. John's fans going back just 2, 3 years. That's a level of confidence and hubris that, this fan base is not used to, and frankly didn't deserve to be used, to be talking like that. Lots has changed since the end of last season.
Alabama fans are very familiar with Rick Pitino, not just from his time at Kentucky, but maybe one of the most crushing losses in Alabama history was when he was at Providence in 1987. Billy Donovan got hot from the 3-point line. He was 5 of 6. Providence as a team was 14 of 22 from three. The team shot 68% and knocked two-seed Alabama out of the NCAA tournament. When I think about St. John's coming off of last year, it's defense, defense, defense. First game of the year against Quinnipiac, you go out and score 108 points. What has changed in just the offseason that makes it look like, I know it's a small sample size, but is St. John's going to be an offensive juggernaut this year as well with an incredible defense?
That was the mindset going into this portal season for Rick Pitino. It was to get better offensively. It was to get better shooting, because you still had Zuby Ejiofor anchoring your middle, and everything starts there. But what he wanted to do, what this coaching staff really wanted to do, was to make sure that they weren't struggling with their jump shot. They weren't struggling from the 3-point line. Game one on Monday, 8 of 19 from three, 42%. Low volume, which is something that is important going into the Alabama game, because Bama's going to shoot it. They're going to shoot it quick. We've heard Rick Pitino say that these guys are 9 seconds and up every time down the court. But you'll take 42% all the time. You bring in a guy like Ozias Sellers, who's a 40% three-point shooter. Ian Jackson's a 39% three-point shooter. He went 6 of 6 in game one, didn't miss a shot, didn't miss a three, 15 points. The identity of this basketball team went from athletic and defensive forward to offensive skill players all over the court. And that front court is going to beat you down and grind you down, because you want to try and stop Zuby Ejiofor. You got Dylan Mitchell right there. You got Bryce Hopkins right there. Coming off the bench is a Ruben Prey. Good luck. That's the difference this year, is the offensive weapons and the amount of guys that can score in so many different ways.
When I was listening to y'all's podcast talking about the game, you were really impressed, I think, with your second unit. And to be honest, I'm familiar with Ejiofor and Hopkins and Ian Jackson and Mitchell, but I was not very familiar with your second unit. What are some guys that Alabama fans need to be worried about when St. John's is making some changes, trying to keep guys fresh, need to be kind of keyed in on to make sure they don't go off and have a career game as well?
So Josan Sandin is a transfer from ASU. He did come off the bench in game one. He might start very well. I think this is a guy that's going to play at the next level in a year or two. Really dynamic offensive player, had 14 points, 2 assists, 2 rebounds, 1 steal, is not shy about shooting that thing. And he has a very, very quick first step, can get to the rim. He's lightning in transition. He's somebody to watch out for. Sadiku Ibini-Ayo is Rick Pitino's favorite player. If he could name him Sadiku Ibini-Ayo Pitino, he would. He adores this guy. He was one of the first guys that came over from Iona to St. John's when Rick Pitino came. But he's transformed himself into a really solid 6'6" wing 10 points in the first game, 3 rebounds. He's going to be that hustle glue guy that you're going to see flying around the court. Dylan Darling, the Big Sky Player of the Year, transferred to St. John's. He's the only guy who you can say is quote unquote a point guard. He had 6 points, 6 assists, 4 rebounds, 3 steals. Didn't shoot it great in that game, but he was able to stuff the stat sheet. And watch for this. If Alabama's guards get a little bit feisty and want to take him on because he's smaller, he's about 6'1", Dylan Darling is good for at least 1 or 2 charges a game, and he'll be right there to open up his chest and take that. He is somebody that's a very vital piece to the St. John's offense. Kelvin Odie is a big freshman, 6'4", 6'5", but he is built like a tank. You're going to see him, you're going to be like, that kid's a freshman. Really solid Pete guy. Don't know how much he's going to play, but in excuse me, in just 9 minutes, 5 points, 5 rebounds, and it's just one of these hustle guys, never ever stops. Those are some of the guys that you really got to look out for. Again, Ruben Prey, 6'10", really good offensively. He's going to be the guy that comes in to supplement some of the big guys for whether it's Hopkins, Mitchell, or Zuby off the bench.
I don't know if I would say Alabama had problems with it last year, but we had 12 guys that could give you solid minutes if you needed it to. So sometimes, maybe just wasn't as cohesive as you wanted to be as far as who was going to get minutes, who was going to play, and finding a really great rhythm and people finding their roles. How do you think this St. John's team, because you just rattled off a ton of guys and we didn't even talk about, the starters.
Yeah.
How's everybody accepting their roles? How do you feel like your team will gel throughout the season with, you may be a guy that plays 20 minutes one game and then you may play 5 minutes the next game.
It's interesting because one of my big questions coming into the Alabama game is going to be how do the minute allocation change? Because obviously, much different, higher skill level opponent than Quinnipiac, who it was picked to win the MAC conference, and St. John's took care of them handily by 34 points against Alabama. Obviously, it's not going to be that kind of a margin. So I'm curious because nobody on St. John's played more than 26 minutes. I want to see how that role changes for everybody. How, the guards, Ian Jackson played 15 minutes. Joe Sansanin didn't play that much. So it's a question of how is Rick Pitino going to deploy these guys? I think some of the entire bench was cleared out. The walk-ons were on the court with the 6 minutes to play. So I think a lot of that's going to change. I think, like I said, these guys are really media trained. Nobody here seems to have an ego and is selfish, even though they're getting paid a lot of money. The NIL, number is huge here. It's not a secret when you get a #1 transfer portal class, you're ponying up, and normally that comes with guys having a ego and thinking that they're amazing and they deserve a lot of playing time, and I certainly understand that. But man, these guys are all for one, one for all, with a common goal of, we saw what happened last year with St. John's. We want to do better than that.
This game is going to be in Madison Square Garden, most famous arena in the United States, but you also have Carnesecca Arena. So what's the difference between those two arenas? How much more elevated is the game? I mean, it's 5 versus 15, so it's obviously a very high profile game. But what does it mean to St. John's fans to either take the train into Manhattan to go to Madison Square Garden or just to have a bigger arena to play in for these marquee games?
Carnesecca Arena, and formerly known as Alumni Hall, it's just a small gym. Most people will call it a high school gym. It's old. It is very, very old, but it's a true home court advantage for St. John's. The win percentage in there is like 84%, but it seats 5,100 fans. It's for most of the bye games. You get one Big East game in there, two back in the day, but man, you're selling the Garden, man. It's Madison Square Garden. The fact that that's a home court for us is so amazing. It's funny because I talked to my wife, who's a big St. John's fan too, and she's like, "It's Madison Square Garden. We're here all the time." And I'm like, "Yeah, but like to the rest of the world, this is a big deal to play here. People plan their vacations around coming here, and I think you try not to take that for granted." Because you walk into that arena and you see the roof, the iconic roof when it's lit up in red and white. I mean, you look up, you got retired Knicks jerseys, you got the Rangers jerseys, you got Luke Hornaceka's 526 win flag up there. It's a special building. It's a big game feel every time. And it's going to be rocking on Saturday with, I think, over 15,000 fans in the building. So it's going to be probably just under a sellout. It's going to be amazing.
For our Alabama fans that either live in New York, lived in New York, visited New York, kind of a fun question to throw at you. What's your train route to get from Queens into Manhattan? What lines are you jumping on?
Oh man, see, I live in Long Island, so I don't take the train I take the LIRR, Long Island Railroad, into the city from here. Man, what are we taking from Queens? From Carnesecca Arena, I think you gotta get onto a bus and you got to take it to like Kew Gardens and get on. That you're stumping me there, man. I haven't taken a train from Queens since I was like probably a freshman at St. John's. So, yeah, you got me there. You're gonna have to come back to me on that.
Well, maybe that makes all the tourists feel a little bit better as far as having to
Yeah,
navigate the New York City subway system
yeah.
a
Take
little
an
bit.
Uber.
Yeah, take an Uber and just make it happen.
Yeah,
Well, I was joking about it beforehand. Y'all said on your podcast Nate Oates was psychotic with his scheduling. We agree. We're a little surprised we're not staying for another week and playing the Knicks and the Nets.
yeah.
But y'all have a phenomenal schedule with this as well. And I'm kind of jumping ahead. We want to get back to the Alabama game, but you already got a tough Big East schedule. Why do you think Rick Pitino put all these tough games together as well, before having to take on the Big East?
When you get the number one transfer portal class in the country, you got a schedule to back it up. You have to. And you brought up Arkansas in the tournament last year when St. John's ran into a team that they weren't ready for. And the big thing coming out of that game was St. John's didn't see a team like that all year. And from a size perspective, from the physicality, when the non-conference schedule was coming together this year, that was the thought process, in my opinion, was even looking at the Michigan exhibition game to Alabama to Ole Miss to being in the Players Era tournament, which Alabama will be in as well. The 18 of the best teams in the country, minus a few. Looking at you, Syracuse, and a few others. Um, but and then you come back with Ole Miss and Kentucky before you get into the Big East. Like you're scheduling with a purpose to one, see where your weaknesses are early on so that you can target them, but also you're playing all these different kind of teams, three SEC teams, so that when the tournament comes and you're in and you're a 1, 2, 3, or 4 seed, that the same situation doesn't repeat itself. Now, you hope that a 3 for 17 shooting night and a cold shooting night doesn't repeat itself either, but you can't go into the game saying, we don't really know how to handle this kind of lineup or this kind of play style. I think that was the real emphasis put on the way the schedule was built this year.
You mentioned you expect 15,000 fans in Madison Square Garden cheering on the Johnnies. New York's got so many things going on constantly. I mean, of course, it's New York City. I was shocked in a good way, I think, last year with y'all success that Jimmy Fallon decided to do the sea shanty and bring the team together and all that. But how does the city rally around St. John's basketball when you do have it going? And how do you paint the Big Apple St. John's red, basically?
Well, you win. That's it's. I know it's silly, but it's that simple. You get Rick Pitino, and then you win. This city gets behind its winners, and it's a fair weather fan base in this city because there is so much to do, like you said. But you got the Giants, the Jets, the Knicks, the Nets. If you want to even count the Nets, but then you got whether it's the Liberty, whether you got the soccer teams, you've got so much to do, and then St. John's is captivating the nation, going 31-5 with huge games, selling out the Garden the last 5 games, winning in the Big East tournament in the Garden. You captivate the city, and then you do things like go on Jimmy Fallon. You're all over on magazines. You have the back page all the time. That's how you rally a fan base, and that's also how you build a fan base for the future. St. John's has had a very loyal fan base, but it's fairly small in the sense of you're hoping that it grows. And how do you grow a fan base? How do you get the kids and the next generation? you got to get them interested. You got to get cool swag. You got to get, in front of their faces. And that's what happened last year. You're on the billboards, you're in Times Square, you're everywhere. And, winning does that. And hopefully it continues this year.
Well, as you continue to build, I'm sure you're hoping that one of those building blocks is a win this Saturday. What are your thoughts as Alabama and St. John's square off Saturday morning, but it'll be lunchtime, for
Yeah.
you in the Eastern time zone. What are your initial thoughts heading into the game this Saturday?
I'm super intrigued on what is going to happen because I think it's going to answer a lot of questions for St. John's early on. Alabama's guards, assuming that they're back from injury, versus St. John's guards, then it's the front court. It's I separate the battles, or I think I give the edge to Alabama on the guards, and I give St. John's the edge on the forward situation. And then it's like, all right, well, where is like what weighs more? And I think the way that St. John's looked in game one, the way that front court was gelling, the way that they were passing to each other, the way they were communicating, Dylan Mitchell scoring a team high with 18 points, 7 rebounds, Ejiofor with 17 points, 6 rebounds, Bryce Hopkins adding in 8 points, 4 rebounds. These guys, they combined for 43 points, 17 rebounds, and 10 of St. John's 25 assists in the game. And you're like, that's just 3 guys, and that's your entire front court. When I talk about pick your poison, that's what I'm talking about. And I think that that's such an advantage for St. John's, especially over Alabama, where I think they are going to struggle with St. John's physicality and size and athleticism. And the way that those guys play defense, man, Mitchell and Ejiofor can switch 1 through 5. Hopkins can play the 3, 4, and the 5. There's a lot of versatility. I think that that's where the key is going to be. I'm very curious to see how Ian Jackson follows up a perfect night from the floor in limited minutes against the super athletic and super skilled and super quick guards from Alabama. How does the defense hold up, especially from the guards? I'm not worried about the forwards and their defense. I'm worried about the guards playing defense. Can they keep up? Can they stay in front of their man? And the biggest thing, and one of the biggest problems that St. John's has suffered from in the first 2 exhibition games and the first game, they've been handsy. They've been calling a lot of fouls on the guards. The reason why Sannon and Jackson and a few of the guards, Sellers in the first 2 games, exhibition didn't play is because they've been fouling a lot. And that's the one thing that if Alabama's going to be aggressive, get into their offense really quickly, they could get St. John's in trouble. So that's definitely a point to watch if the whistles get involved.
So that obviously being a weakness, I agree with you. I think St. John's is a very strong front court. My concern from an Alabama perspective is whether they let them play or not, we know St. John's is a very good defense. I think Rick Pitino, the 2 times he was at Iona, did a great job against Nate Oates and Alabama's offense. And if you could really turn Alabama over, not only are you now getting free possessions, but you're probably going to do well on the glass too and keep possessions as well. What other than being handsy or stuff like that, Rick Pitino's talked about it being a track meet. Are you confident that I think St. John's can do it, but are you confident St. John's can play a slugfest and a track meet?
Yeah, you don't want to run with us. You're going to play right into St. John's hands. And I think, and Rick said at the end of his press conference that we know we can play like that, as because he noted that Alabama's going to play fast. That goes into how St. John's plays. I mean, Rick won't call a timeout if things are getting close because he's going to let them run. St. John's scored 1.36 points per possession in the first game. Like, these are guys that want to run. 108 points. They scored 54 points in both halves. And again, that's with limited 3-point shooting. 66 points in the paint. Like, this is a team that if you want to run, okay, good luck keeping up. I think that that's not the style that you want to test St. John's with. I think that if Alabama shoots the 3 the way that we think and historically they know how to, and at the volume that they do, that's where St. John's is going to, I think, have an issue keeping up because they don't really put up that many. And again, the 19 that they took in game 1 I thought was low. I think you got to almost double that output to keep up with Alabama. So it's just it's I don't even think it's a contrast of styles. I just think it's going to be like which style prevails more, and it's going to answer a lot of questions for St. John's. Can the defense of the guards answer the bell? It is a huge thing. Guys like Joe Sansanin, Sellers, uh, Jackson, Sellers, Joe Sansan, and guys who were not really known for their defense in their previous locations. When they come to St. John's, you're expected to play defense, and so how are you going to do against the one of the best backcourts in the country? It's a huge question mark going into this game.
I know you're not expecting this. You're expecting St. John's to win. It's interesting. Like I look at St. John's right now, and it also reminds me of Alabama's team last year of just the expectations, having so many players. Alabama last year had a great first game. Next two games struggled a little bit. They won against weaker competition, and then they go to Purdue and they lose. And you would have thought for some fans, season was already over. This team's not gonna, you know, meet expectations. You being a voice for St. John's basketball, if for some reason it doesn't go your way on Saturday, how will you be able to manage your own expectations? And how do you think St. John's fans should be able to manage expectations? Because it is only going to be game two of the college basketball season.
Oh yeah, listen, it's not the end of the world. Can St. John's lose this game? Absolutely. It's going up against the number 15 team in the country. There's no like overconfidence going into this game, but I think that what you saw in game one was very encouraging. And I think before that game, you looked at this game as more of a little bit of a toss up. I think now they are just going to have a little bit more swagger going into it. I think it was important to play that way. But if you lose this game, you got two bye games afterwards, and then you're going into Las Vegas. The worry becomes, well, if you drop Alabama, it's your first marquee game of the year. Then you go play Iowa State in that first game against Las Vegas. That's a really tough game. That's another ranked opponent that is going to absolutely, boa constrict you with their defense. You could very well drop that game. All right, your first two marquee games, you drop those. Then what? And then in New York, what's going to happen is that, your fan base starts to wonder what's going on, and everybody is going to be a little bit more pessimistic. It's not the end of the world. There are so many chances with this non-conference schedule, and then you got a handful of marquee games in the conference. I just don't want to tempt fate and kind of find out, of course. But again, I don't think it's the end of the world. There's a possibility that it happens. I don't think it will because I really like the matchup for St. John, specifically with the forwards. And I think the momentum coming off that first game, like they just looked really good. It was really aesthetically pleasing. It was a clean game and they were flying around. Just a really encouraging first effort from St. John's.
Big East basketball reminds me a lot of SEC football. Everybody's got tradition. Everybody's been good at some point, except for maybe DePaul and Vanderbilt. Everybody's got a rivalry against multiple teams throughout the conference. And the Big East is going to be led by St. John's and UConn this year. But there's so many other good teams. As just a basketball fan, how excited are you just for, Big East basketball once the calendar gets to 2026 in January and February
Yeah.
of next year?
The hope is that it's better because last year it was, you got five teams into the tournament. One in Xavier just squeaked in. This year, I think it's very top heavy. You got St. John's and UConn at the top. I think Creighton is right there. I think you got three teams in the tournament for sure. I think Providence is much improved. I like the talent on the team. I question if Kim English can get it done in big games, but I think they're going to be a tournament team. The question is, can they get a fifth team in? Because I think four will make it. And after that, I'm not sure. Georgetown is much improved. They just went into Rupp Arena and beat Kentucky. Yes, it was an exhibition game, but hey, that takes a lot of moxie to do that. And I commend Ed Cooley and his group for doing that. Marquette is just this stubborn team that refuses to use the transfer portal. That's Shaka Smart's way. And he is always relying on guys to step up and figure it out. That's a really dangerous game to continue to play when all the teams around you are spending boatloads of money and are improving and are reloading when you're just kind of hoping that guys can just step up. So Marquette's success is going to be on, can Chase Ross take the next step? Can Royce Parham take the next step? Can you get some of these freshmen to step up? it's a tough question to ask. It's like, listen, Tyler Kolek ain't walking through that door. Cam Jones is not walking through that door. Oso Ighodaro is not walking through that door from Marquette. So it's tough to have that kind of a expectation. Right now, I think Marquette's not making the tournament. That's hard to say about a Marquette team that's always in the tournament. So it's going to be Marquette, Georgetown. I think possibly one of those teams could make the five, but the bottom is tough. Seton Hall is going to be really poor again for two years in a row. DePaul, I think, is going to be much improved. I think that Xavier's going to have a tough year with Richard Pitino in his first one, and yeah. So I think you get four teams into the tournament. I think if you get five, you're really happy, and the rest of the guys, you got some new coaches in the conference with Villanova and Kevin Willard, and again with Richard Pitino. So you got to see how they shake up, but probably not this year.
Yeah, regardless of team success, it feels like, every weekend in the Big East or every midweek, there's going to be a storyline every night. Obviously, what St. John's is going to be doing and what Connecticut's going to be doing. But obviously, Georgetown and Providence and the rivalry that's been built there between Ed Cooley going to
Hmm.
Georgetown and leaving Providence. Kevin Willard, like you said, going to Villanova, who was a former Seton Hall coach.
Yep.
You talk about Marquette and Shaka Smart, who's obviously been very successful. I'm going to remove Connecticut, UConn from this question to you. And before I jump, as you mentioned, Richard Pitino at Xavier, father and son playing
Mhm.
against each other. Can't choose Connecticut. What game are you most looking forward to for St. John's at home, Big East opponent, when the calendar turns to conference play?
Ooh, at home.
I'm gonna choose a home game because I'm sure you want to be there and you want to watch
Sure.
it.
I mean, playing Creighton again at the Garden is always fun. It's going to be a rematch of the Big East title game. I think Creighton's going to be awesome. Again, really talented team. They're playing, I think right now, about to tip off. Um, so that's probably the one that I'll pick. Selfishly, I always like beating up on Seton Hall because I hate them so much. They're my number one most hated team. So ending the season against Seton Hall, I'm always a fan of beating them. St. John's got to beat them last year at Madison Square Garden to win the Big East Conference. So that's always fun. But yeah, if I had to pick one, it's probably Creighton at Madison Square Garden. But I'm gonna cheat and I'm taking one on the road because I do travel and the fan base wants to travel. And listen, get ready for Valentine's Day. Clear your schedule. We're not going out. We're not going to a romantic dinner. We're not going to no restaurants. The chocolate, candy, flowers, all that gets put to the side. You make your way to Providence and you go to see St. John's versus Providence. Valentine's Day, the return of Bryce Hopkins to Providence. You thought the return of Ed Cooley was bad at Providence. This is going to be right there. Maybe not as hostile, but it's going to be there. Those Providence fans have not stopped talking and chirping Bryce Hopkins since he decided to transfer.
I am a big fan of Requiem for the Big East, the 30
Mhm.
for 30 that ESPN did. I'm surprised Georgetown did not make the list just between I mean, I know Georgetown's been really bad, but
Yeah, that's why.
well, I mean, for us as Alabama fans, if Auburn or Tennessee was really bad, we'd still want to dominate them every time we played.
It's
No matter
different. Like they haven't been that bad.
that's
There's been Georgetown has been pretty lowly like for a while. St. John's too is like there hasn't there's no Louis and Coach Thompson rivalry there. So as much as that is old history and it's great and there's a lot of nostalgia, the rivalries now are it's UConn and and honestly it's Seton Hall.
all right. Well, talking about history, one unique thing about both these programs is their coaches do like to make fashion statements. Alabama, Wimp Sanderson with the plaid jacket, Nate Oates now with the plaid jacket, Lou Carnesecca with his sweaters, Rick Pitino with the white suit. I'm giving you only two options for your game day attire. Do you go Lou Carnesecca sweater? Do you go Rick Pitino white suit?
Ah, you got to go white suit, man. It, Anybody can, and no disrespect, I've got a loose sweater too, but man, you walk in with the white suit. Either you're like straight out of Miami Vice or you're Rick Pitino. I mean, listen, that could be a Halloween costume for somebody. Halloween just passed, but it's iconic. Everybody look forward to it. We usually get one a year. I got a trading card they put out last year with Rick Pitino in a white suit with like a piece of fabric. Like that's it's iconic, man.
As I mentioned, I listen to y'all's podcast. I know y'all are excited for this game. I know we're excited for this game. And I think that's something great for both fan bases
For
that
sure.
want to love basketball, that have basketball tradition and history, and now they're re-emerging not only as powers in their own conference, but powers in the country as well, competing for second weekends and Final Four trips. I want to give you the last word, final thoughts about the game. What do you think's going to happen Saturday?
Look, I think for both teams, you're each going into it knowing that it's going to tell you something about the rest of your season, about what you have. And for Alabama, who is scheduled so tough, this can only help them and Nate Oates. I think you're going to find it hard to see another team that plays probably quicker than St. John's this year. That's going to be really interesting to see. And the same can be said for St. John's against Alabama. These SEC teams have an identity, and it's just going to be what you guys do really well, which is play fast and shoot the three versus St. John's trying to lock you up and trying to impose its will through the paint. They're going to play through their forwards. I think Ian Jackson on his home court in front of his home fans at Madison Square Garden is going to try and make sure that that game one performance wasn't a fluke. It's going to be really fun to see Joe Sansanin and Ian Jackson go up against the Alabama guards. Fun game, important game for both programs. I think either one that loses, it's not the end of the world. I think the Johnnies get it by 6 or 8 points, and I'm looking forward to seeing it.
I'm expecting St. John's to have a great year. For our Alabama basketball fans that like to fill out brackets, where can they be keeping up with you, hear more about St. John's throughout the season, listening to your podcast and anything else you may be putting out there?
Yeah, it's the Eye on the Storm podcast. Been covering St. John's for 4 years. Apple, Spotify, wherever you consume your podcasts, or on YouTube, also same name. And I'm on Twitter, SJU Dave, because that's what I cover. And podcast has a page too. And I'm always around, happy to talk hoops. Charles, got to bring you on to the show maybe after the game, and we'll chop it up again, see what happens after Saturday afternoon.
That'd be awesome. This has been a lot of fun. Just our conversation about basketball in general before we even got started was a lot of
Yeah,
fun. I'm not going to wish you good luck on Saturday. I wish you
that's
good luck
okay.
on the rest of the season. But, hopefully there's another time. Like you said, I'd love to come on, but love to keep talking basketball with you. Very excited for St. John's. Very excited for Alabama. It's going to be a 12 o'clock Eastern time,
That's right.
11 o'clock a.m. Central Time on Fox Sports 1. So, Alabama fans, you should be able to find it. Even if you got YouTube TV, you don't have to worry about ESPN or ABC. Might have to figure something out for the football game later that night. But we're hoping as Alabama fans, we start off the Saturday well and then finish it well with the win against LSU. But, David, man, I can't appreciate you enough for your time. Thank you again, and good luck to you after Saturday the rest of the way.
Thanks, Charles. Appreciate it.